Hello, welcome to the AppleInsider Podcast. I'm William Gallagher. Our sponsors this week are Oracle and Factor. More about them later. I'm also coming to you as the UK distributor of flu bugs. Collected it in Switzerland last week. Sorry about the voice being a little off. It's getting better. Even by the end of the episode, you'll barely notice it. Joining me, healthily, though, is Wes Hilliard. Wes, hello.
Hello, William. Glad to have you back. And, this is what happens when you take a week off. You go and you collect flus and distribute them, and now you're just not helping with this whole, future pandemic situation that we're talking about.
Okay, I offer you in return that actually no. What happens when I take a week off is that you get a special guest in. You get Tim Chatton in. And I thought, listening away, having a very nice time on an aircraft, listening to this stuff, thinking this is going to be about Vision Pro, because it was the 1 year anniversary. It'll be about iPads, because it's like the 15th anniversary, and you and Tim together, iPad, absolutely, but no. You threw in bits about the Mac and I sat up. I wanted to ask questions. And I have questions that we will come to. But first, all of this travelling around, all of this special guest stuff, really what we need in this life is some kind of invitation system, some sort of event management. Any chance you've got one for me at all?
Well, Apple has done the thing. We had some rumors a couple weeks ago about an invites application. We weren't sure if it was going to be attached to calendar or what it was going to be. It's totally separate. It's its own entity. In fact, it's not even attached to calendar in any way except by an API call that creates an invite poorly, I might say. So, yeah, what do you think of this app?
Well, I think I was wrong. Actually, weeks ago, I thought there is no possible way Apple will do an event app that isn't tied to calendar, and Apple has done an event app that isn't tied to calendar. But balancing out my wrongness, I think it is staggering that Apple has released an app, not only that it's a party planning, event planning app, that it, really cleverly gets together so many of Apple's services, including Apple Music, Apple Photos. It's in your face and go on, use these. And the one thing it does not use is Apple Calendar. You have to know that when you've set up an invitation, there's a button on the last screen. You've got to find it and press it, or it doesn't go in your calendar. And I just think the rumours we heard said that it might be being tested, released to internally in Apple for testing. And I think they skipped that because surely that's something that's going to be fixed in Apple Invites 2.
Or perhaps a future calendar update where we get a full GUI redesign, which is something I've discussed before, because calendar is feeling a little stale at this point. And maybe the UI of Invites is a hint of where Apple's going with its future app redesigns.
That's such a good point. So I was reading somewhere somebody saying that this is the future of iOS, but I use Fantastical, but every now and again, even today, actually, this one weird appointment. I have a shortcut that creates an appointment. Fine, it's a regular thing, slightly different times, push a button, there it is. It always goes straight into calendar, and for some reason, doesn't always replicate over to Fantastical. It's like it's the only thing that doesn't. So I've obviously done something somewhere, but once in a while, I have to open up calendar to see, well, did it happen at all? And there it was. And I look at it and I think, calendar does seem a bit dull compared to Fantastical. So, yeah.
Even Fantastical is based off of those old paradigms. I described it, I think, in an AppleInsider Plus segment, but I think Apple should be thinking of a full GUI interface for reminders and calendar, rather than it being heavily text-based with grids, like they're basically sheets of paper. Calendar does still kind of call back to that, what's the word I'm looking for?
Paper?
The making things look real, like real objects digitally.
Oh, skeuomorphism.
Yes. Yeah. Calendar is one of the few apps I think that still leans into skeuomorphism. And of course, it's a calendar, so you're going to want to see a calendar, right? And it looks like a paper calendar. But I think that the elements of it where you're clicking into a space to type into it with text, and it's all still a little bit old-fashioned. I want to see clickable, draggable objects and more, just sliders, grabbable objects, less text input, and even Fantastical leans heavily into what they use as their natural language input, which is still just text input. So I would love to see more support for things. And I think you can drag an event between days, if I'm not mistaken, but
yes,
it's just not obvious, and it even the one on iOS still feels very Mac OS-y. It doesn't feel like there's any grabbers or anything in there. So I think there's room for some design updates. But we're going to talk about invites. Did you try creating an invite?
Yes, I did. But hang on, I can't let this go. You said feels Mac OS-y, like that's a criticism. Okay, we're going to have a one-on-one App Insider Plus episode. I should say App Insider Plus. It's for subscribers, so you get an ad-free version and an extended one. So App Insider is about the news of the week, although we might go off on one every now and again, as we seem to be doing now. All right, I said I am. App Insider Plus is the extended version where we can talk about anything, because we're all using this gear, we're all liking this gear mostly, we're all having similar problems with it. That's Apple Insider Plus, and I think maybe you and I, Wes, should have it out, Mac versus iPad, once and for all, as long as I win in App Insider Plus. But also, I don't have any problem with entering text. You mentioned reminders, and I do have a problem with mixing up tasks and reminders and things. But I believe you can actually drag a task from reminders onto your calendar, and it gets a block booking. Certainly you can with Fantastical and things. So there's already some dragability, but like you said, not exactly obvious.
Right. I guess what I'm looking for, and it's hard to describe because I'm not an app designer, is I would like to see a calendar app where, and I've seen third-party apps try to do this, but I just want more interface representation, right? Right now in like Apple Calendar, the only way you really distinguish between events is if you color code them based on which calendar they're in, and then you go and read the text, right? What if instead of it being that, what if they were cards, right? Like Apple uses a lot of card systems across the operating system, like in the App Store. And what if it was a card for your event with an image? And so look at the Events app where you have a image at the top, the name of the event, and then face bubbles for who's going. That could be represented in the Calendar app within the space. And then, of course, it would have to stretch to fit either a large block or a small block. But, right, that's the kind of interface I'm talking about. Rather than just a plain, clear, transparent-y color with a bit of text in the corner describing your event. What if, and it doesn't have to get too cute or too creative. You can meet in the middle. It's if you want plain text, you can have it. But if you want to go in and add stuff to it, you can add stuff to it. It's just, I want the events and calendar to be more functional rather than so utilitarian. And it can meet in the middle, right? Right. We need utility. This is a utilitarian app. I don't want to take away from that, but I just feel like they could ramp up the design just a little bit.
And do you think that Apple Invites is a clue that they're going that way?
Well, so if we look at Apple's recent apps, what have we got? Right, Clips was 2017 recent. Then but that was a representation of a new GUI pattern we hadn't seen before, right? GUI's graphical user interface, and then if we jump forward a little bit, Apple's, I think, next new app, it's been a minute, we got Apple Journal and then Apple Sports within really close proximity of each other. And both of these take on similar positions. It's very card-based, big graphical bubbles, things that menus you switch between, very stylistic in that way. And then Invites comes along and it looks very similar to kind of the same UI paradigm that we're seeing across these other apps. So these 4 apps I'm looking at are relatively recent Apple apps that diverge from Apple's previous design paradigms. And I'm wondering if we're going to see more of this in the future or if this is just an experiment.
I don't think Freeform followed that form, but I can't quite remember where Freeform came in that list. So
Freeform's tough. It's more recent. It's like 2022, I think, ish. Last few years, more recent than Clips anyway. But Freeform's, I think, a little bit more different because it was built to be more of an old school app based on the Notes, Reminders, Calendar paradigm, and it's an open sheet of paper. You're not going to have much GUI there anyway. Apple loves minimalism, and this thing's a blank sheet of canvas, right? So what UI are you going to have there other than what interactions you're going to have with the document? So I would have to go look at it again. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I have a feeling it looks more like the Notes and modern Apple app UI rather than these experimental UIs.
Do you remember when the action button came out? This is going to sound a little odd, but the action button, you set it up through through settings. Once you go into the setting for it, the setting section is radically different to any other setting in settings. And I'm suddenly reminded of this. I mean, it's not the same. But
it screamed skeuomorphism. It was actually a third kind of design, separate from what we're seeing with these new apps, separate from Apple's older design. This was completely different. It was basically showing a video of the phone in a graphical context and showing you where the button is and what it was going to be with a little graphic on the button. So maybe someone just got carried away, right? This is one of those UI areas where one person's probably working on it, and they just got bored and decided to build something really crazy, and Apple liked it and put it in there. I don't know that we're going to see more of that. I would be interested in seeing more of that across the system, but I don't want it to get too much like I'm riding a roller coaster. We've seen this with Android interfaces, especially when people skin them, where you can literally make it feel like you're riding a roller coaster when you're switching apps. I don't think Apple wants to go that far, especially since they have a reduced motion function, and if too much of the UI becomes movable in this way and too crazy, the reduced motion function would basically turn off the UI at that point, and that would be disastrous. So I think Apple's happy to meet in the middle somewhere.
I don't want it to be too fussy. I'm fine. Actually, I like how Invites looks, but the thing with the settings and the action button, it's like I did think enough already as I was swiping through the third time to change something. Yeah. I'm not with you on the calendar one fully because maybe because I just like Fantastical more, and I'm very a text-based thinker rather than visual. But I see there's room for change.
Yeah, I'm not committed to, like, even what I described. I feel like is still not a good description of what I'm looking for. I would know it if I saw it. I feel like this is just one of those things where something needs to change, and I feel like it needs to be have better presentation and more interaction, but whatever that means, I think Apple should be looking at for a future update.
But you have seen Apple Invites, so have I, and one of the things I've seen is that you did not invite me to your Super Bowl party.
So I wanted to...
We're just going to skip over that. That's fine. Okay.
Well, I mean, if you'd like to fly over here with your pandemic flu and spread it to the United States. No, Ground Zero, William. I think if or Patient Zero actually, I wanted to go ahead and jump into this app and try it out. And we have a few upcoming things. We have some birthdays coming up, and Super Bowl though is the closest. And we are having a little party with some appetizers, and we're going to watch the halftime show, which is really what I'm there for. I guess I'm going to root for the Eagles because I like M. Night Shyamalan, and that's in Philadelphia. Also, Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Shout out.
It's good to see sports fans fully invested in their local team. But okay, Eagles.
I'm rooting on it based on the TV shows that I enjoy, basically. And the Chiefs won twice, so I'm going to go ahead and go with the underdog and hope that they lose because, sure, they'll make history, whatever. But I don't care. We'll do more Super Bowl here in a minute. But Invites. I wanted to go ahead and create a Super Bowl invite. I went and found an image for the Super Bowl. I didn't want to generate the thing it generated, by the way, because there is a tool in here, Image Playground, that lets you generate the image for your invite. Super Bowl, it knew it was a football game. It kind of tried to make a football into a stadium with a TV in the middle of it. It just didn't work out. So I went ahead and grabbed a regular image. I generated the invitation. The notes section was nice because we had a note for who was making what food. So I put that in the notes section. And then I just shared it to the group chat where we are. And that's basically everyone that's going. So it was very simple. I didn't have to go through and pick every contact, which you can if you want to, and send them individual messages. And it just sent, and it showed up as a nice little link that they click on in Messages. You can create, I didn't do it for this one, but you can create a photo album and a music album that everyone can participate in. And it all ties together very nicely. I think this is a really good example of Apple creating kind of the Synergy app. Like, here's all of the Apple ecosystem in one place. well, a lot of it anyway. Contacts, Apple Music, Photos, Apple Weather, and Image Playgrounds, Calendar, all of it kind of meshed into this one app, which I find very interesting, and I want to see more apps like it bring everything in this way. For example, the reason why this is nice is if you want to generate a playlist for Apple Music, where do people go to edit and view that, right? They have to know where to go in Apple Music. They have to find the playlist and they have to edit themselves. After you've generated it, it's lost forever. Same thing with Photos, especially for the layman, right? Like, go to the Photos app, scroll to the shared photo album, then add photos to it. Events gives you a destination. I'm going to go to this event, and this is where that playlist is, and this is where that photo album is. And that makes all of these features that much more accessible.
I don't want to be Mr. Grumpy here, but take music, for example. When I tried to add, well, eventually, when I managed to add a playlist, it just hung on me to give up on that. But on the way, it said, no, you can't have a shared music playlist because you don't have, William, an Apple Music profile. I have been paying for Apple Music for over 10 years. I'd never heard of Apple Music profile, and it turns out you have to go through this thing of telling the world which playlists of yours you can listen to, because I'm sure the world cares that I'm in. Was Marla and the Kids from Fame? There you go. And other people's playlists. Yeah. Am I interested? No, but apparently I've got to be in order to do this. So
you can make a profile and make it private and do nothing with it. I have a public profile, and it has a few playlists I've made shared to it, and you can see what music I'm listening to. It's a very simple thing. It's very much like Game Center, and you can follow people by searching for them in Apple Music or through your contacts. So Apple Music profile is fine. This is what I've been getting at for a while now, that Apple has basically the pieces of a social network that they refuse to combine. And Invites is actually one of the few places that they've combined a lot of these things into one place. You're right, though. You need a few things for this to work.
And I don't find it very clear about that. I'm looking at thinking it's telling me I need a profile. I have no clue what a profile is. But worse than this, I do think the second time you create an event, everything flies through and it's much better. But the first time...
The onboarding should be a lot better. The onboarding should take you through, hey, we notice you don't have Apple Music set up properly. Go make an account. By the way, it can be private. You just need to have a profile to have a shared playlist. And then go go turn on your iCloud shared library setting. It probably needs to be turned on. But the thing is, for all of this to actually work, everyone on Earth can receive an invitation. It doesn't matter if you're Android or iPhone. You don't need an Apple account. But if you're going to send an invitation, you have to be somehow subscribed to iCloud Plus. And if you don't know what that is, if you have Apple One, you have iCloud Plus. Because iCloud Plus is included with Apple One. If you don't, the only way you get Apple One is if you upgrade your iCloud storage. So even if you have the base tier 50 gigabyte $1 a month iCloud plan, you have iCloud Plus. So most people who have an iPhone probably have some version of iCloud Plus, I'm guessing. And those people are the ones that can send invitations.
I said I don't want to sound grumpy, and actually the more you talk, the more I realise I have problems with this, but just to race through them and get them out of the way and move on to more important things. You said it'd be good to have a note saying you haven't set up Apple Music properly. I've set it up properly. I've just never had any interest in profiles. So there's that. But then there's the thing I think is absolutely the worst for the sender. There's a bad thing for the recipient, but for the sender, you get to this stage that the page says, so how do you want to share your contacts? And the options are you share all of them or you share some of them. If you choose some, you can then go through and say, actually, no, I don't want to share any. But you can't at that front page. And there's nothing in there that explains to me for certain what that's actually doing. It appears to me it creates a pot that you can later go through and pick people for. But what it reads like is everyone you send an invitation to gets all the contact details of everyone else you send it to. And I cannot do that. I know I'm in Britain and we're not in the EU anymore, but we are still party to the GDPR things. I can't give out everybody's details to everybody in a group. So I just cannot do it. it's
thankfully
a problem
not.
there.
Yeah, thankfully that's not how it works. But I see how the
It is what it
messaging,
looks like.
it should be clearer. Yes.
Well, then, and I say that's bad for the sender, and I say it's bad for the recipient. I sent one to somebody, and it came through. Yeah, they got the poster, but it didn't half look like spam. Tap on this link to do something. And then when they did, because they were on an iPhone, the top of the screen, they got that little banner coming down with get an app that they hadn't asked for and hadn't heard of. And the bottom two-thirds of the screen, the bottom third of the screen came up with a, do you want to sign into iCloud, which they hadn't asked to do. I had to send them a message saying, this is what's going to go on. And that just seems crazily bad, particularly since if you know to swipe away the ad, fine. If you know to find the X to get rid of the sign-in thing, you can then scroll down and enter an email address, which presumably is what Android and PC users would get and things like that. It's just dreadful.
It's a poor launch on for a number of reasons, but at the same time, I can see how this can grow.
Sure.
The problem with this app is something like this probably needs to be a default app. It needs to, like, iOS 19 needs to include it by default, so it's automatically signed into your iCloud, and when you receive an invite, it automatically takes you to the app. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to sign into anything. And then if you're not on iPhone, then you get the website workflow, which you go and enter an email address in a field. Now, here's a problem. If your email address was previously tied to an Apple ID and you switch to Android, it's going to get a little funky because it's going to require you to sign into that Apple ID, and instead you'll need to switch to a different email if you have a different email. So I think that's the biggest sticking point out of all of this. The other things can be overcome with just UI changes and better onboarding flows, and that'll all.
No, hang on. They can be overcome, but they have not been overcome.
Yes.
So in your face, first time, there's just screw up after screw up, I think, on this.
This is an odd. Yeah, this is definitely a poor launch. Like I'm not going to give them a break on that, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I think this app is interesting as we move forward. You know,
yes.
Us techie people are going to meet up with our family for holidays and things. We'll see them eventually, and we can show them how to set this up, because I think going forward, this will be a really nice repository for information. And I'll explain why, because it keeps all your invites. So after an event is over, it kind of sorts through them. I haven't had an event pass yet, so I'll go into detail on how this works later. I don't think they'll ever expire. I think this is similar to Passbook. They'll just fade into a different section, which you can find in the menu of past invites. This is because you can duplicate invites and reuse them. But also, I think the way this will work, and like I said, I'll correct myself if I'm wrong in the future once we get to the point where one expires. I think this means that you can go back to old invites, open them, see who attended, and see the photo album and the music album that was generated for that invite, all in the correct location, and it's just there, and it acts as kind of a looking back at old events repository for information. And I find that interesting, similar to almost like a reverse Apple Journal in some ways.
Why do you think Apple launched this now instead of at WWDC and as part of iOS 19?
It was ready.
But I don't think it was, you see, with all of these problems. The gigantic thing of not linking to the calendar, that is surely something a beta test would have found instantly. So I don't think it was ready. What was their motivation?
Well, I think that was intentional, the calendar thing. When you generate the invite, the top right corner has a button that you tap on, and it opens a calendar event generator. And then you verify the details, and then you save it to the calendar. No,
I've just created an event on a certain day at a certain time, and I have to know that it's not going in my calendar, that I've got to find this button.
No,
which is just a button. It doesn't say calendar on it even. So
I didn't say it was a good thing.
So I'm disagreeing. I don't think it's ready. I think it's great in a lot of ways. I think it's going to be good. But right now, I'm wondering why. Usually, things come out at WWDC. Not always. The sports app came out in like February of last year or the year before. It's sports, I don't pay any attention, but I noticed it was off-season, so to speak. This feels like this year's mid-cycle launch, and I'm curious why, when it seems quite poor to me.
Well, I think if we're going to be fair here, we're used to finished apps. We're used to apps that have been around for decades, And whenever
Yeah.
Apple releases something new, we forget that the new app isn't going to be decades old on the first day. When Apple Sports launched, it was missing many, many features and many sports leagues. It was bare bones. And now we have way more features, and it's actually a much better full-fledged app a few months later. Should they have waited until it was full-fledged before releasing it? Maybe, maybe not. Sometimes it's better to get things out because you need to see, just like with the Vision Pro, you need to see how people are going to use it before you can make the changes that are necessary. And so it's not always as clean cut as, well, only release it when it's ready. Well, if that's how you're going to do things, you might not ever release anything. And
Sure.
like the same thing happened with Clips. Like all these new apps, they came out, they were bare bones, and Apple added features and updates later that made them work. But there's only so much testing you can do internally with 100 employees. You have to get it out to the world. And
Yes, except I don't agree that Invites was good enough to put
fair.
out even in this
That's
form.
fair.
And Apple is sometimes release things with the beta next to it, and they didn't this time. They've said, here is a full app, here is everything, and I think it plainly isn't. So I'm quite shocked at them this time, actually.
It's definitely kludgy. Like, it's hard to get into, and there's certain little elements that are odd that should be fixed later, but it is a fully functional app that works. Like, you can create an invitation, you can share it with your people, and it connects to all your things. It might have a weird workflow, and it may not be easily understood by a lot of people. My biggest roadblock so far is mostly just getting people to accept the invitation and view it, right? Like, I've shared the Super Bowl invite, and I had a few people add it, and then others just breeze by it, and it's like, hey, add join this invitation. This is a new thing. You should try it out. And the people who have joined it are like, oh, this is interesting. I like this. And you can do a lot of interesting things, right? So once you have an invitation that people have joined, you can send out notes to everyone that's already RSVP'd saying, hey, parking is over here. Or, by the way, we need drink cups. Can someone bring drink cups? And it's, it's like this management center for the invite, for the event that you've created. So instead of having to create like a separate group chat, you're able to handle it all from this more centralized location. Yeah. So it's an interesting concept, and I'm with you. Like, it needs to get better, and I think it will get better.
I think I was about to say, actually, I'm with you. All the good things you say is true, but my fundamental disagreement is not it's an app that can do these things. It's an app that you can make it do these things with a lot of effort and unnecessary. And that thing of people not paying any attention to it is because it doesn't look like something you should pay attention when you get the invitation. It just has it's just so poor in so many ways. This episode is brought to you by Oracle. Even if you think it's a bit overhyped, AI is suddenly everywhere, from self-driving cars to molecular medicine to business efficiency. If it's not in your industry yet, it's coming fast. But AI needs a lot of speed and computing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a blazing fast and secure platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, plus all your AI and machine learning workloads. OCI costs 50% less for compute and 80% less for networking. So you're saving a pile of money. Thousands of businesses have already upgraded to OCI, including Vodafone, Thomson Reuters, and Suno AI. Right now, Oracle is offering to cut your current cloud bill in half if you move to OCI. For new US customers with minimum financial commitment, offer ends March 31st. See if your company qualifies for this special offer at oracle.com/AppleInsider. That's oracle.com/AppleInsider. And thanks to Oracle for supporting the Apple Insider podcast.
I was going to say, were you surprised by the Android integration?
I don't even know what Android integration there is. There's to send your email to join, but other than that...
So, yes, basically, if you don't have an Apple product, you can still participate in an invite by providing your email, and then basically anytime there's an update, you get an email to your inbox, and you still show up as a person in the invites on the iPhone side.
That's good.
So, but like, Apple didn't have to do that. They could have just said, no, you need the app, and left it at that. And on Android, apparently, I think you can still join the Apple Music shared playlist. The only thing you cannot do that is not on Android is photos.
Okay. Yep, that's good. I mean, I think Apple's a bit inconsistent over this because it's put Apple Music on Android.
Right.
Why couldn't it have done this? It has, though, Sherlocked this Partiful app that I have to admit I've never heard of before. And Partiful is on Android, so they've like half Sherlocked it for it. How do you feel about Apple, not necessarily just with this one, but with any apps, about it? Actually, I just use the term because I've used it so often. Would you like to explain properly what Sherlocking is?
Yeah, I always forget which one was which, but we had Sherlock and Watson back in the day, and one took over the other. I believe how it worked was Apple released like a feature for search, but it was incomplete. So someone generated an app called, I believe
it was Watson. Yeah,
Watson
came along to fix it.
And
yeah.
and then Apple released Sherlock that did what Watson did. And so basically we use that term as a verb, Sherlocking, when Apple basically replicates someone else's app with their own app. And it's kind of funny that it was Sherlock and Watson in this case, because it's clearly Apple knew what they were doing when they did this. And
I think
later,
to be fair, there is an issue here that the accusation is Apple ripped off Watson, but you can equally argue that Apple did what you said they're doing with invites, that they had a version of this search thing, Sherlock, and they made it better. And the way they made it better were the ways anybody would have made it better, and it happened to be Watson had done the same thing. So was it a natural progression, or did they basically plagiarize Watson? And you can argue both sides, unfortunately.
well, what is it? I forget the company. Steve Jobs called them a feature, and it's not an app.
Oh, yes. Blanked on that. Okay.
It's that type of situation. I believe there are some situations where Apple, Sherlock something and it feels like they stole it, right? It's not justified, but generally speaking, in the history of Apple creating apps and features, what happens is they take what is an obvious next progression and add it to their operating system. And up until that point, people were doing it using third-party applications, and then Apple takes over those third parties, making them part of the system. So folders and shortcuts was handled by a third-party app until Apple added folders, and that app was no longer needed, right? There's so many examples of this throughout Apple's history. It's just, I don't think it's a problem as long as they're not blatantly targeting, like they're not going about it in a poor spirit, more or less. I think so. Like Partiful, for example, it can exist on its own. People don't have to use Apple Invites. Partiful is probably a better system if you have a lot of friends on Android, for example. But at the same time, you're also sharing all of your contact information, all of your data, all of your everything to this app just to create an invite, which is now a native application on your iPhone. You already trust Apple with all of your information. You can share your contacts and your photos and your Apple Music information without worrying about it being an issue, because they already have that data and you already trust them with that data. So you're not entering into a new agreement with a new app with a new party. And I think that's where Invite's biggest strength is it's an Apple app.
I don't want to be an apologist for Apple, because I do feel sorry for the Partiful people, but an argument that has been presented over the years is that when Apple goes into a certain market, they promote it more than any small developer ever could. And in this case, absolutely, I'd never heard of Partiful, and now I have. I'm aware of it. I'm aware of the things it can do. There is going to be a point. There are going to be people who will use Partiful who'd never heard of it before. There are just also going to be people who will now never use it, who might have done, because Apple's there. Apple will go so far, but it won't go further. Reminders, as great as Reminders is for what it does, nobody using, say, OmniFocus or Todoist, they're never going to downgrade to it. So there is an argument that it's growing the market. I just don't know how I would feel if it was my app.
It's bringing attention to something, right? So the sports app, for example, I'm okay with the sports app. I don't need anything else. I'm not placing live bets. I'm not, I don't need to be able to jump straight into a video feed, or there's certain features that are available in the sports app, and Apple's adding some all the time. But you go to these third-party apps and they have like multi-view screens and all this stuff that's just, it's wild. Replays and clips and stuff. Like, it really goes into detail. If you're a sports fan, you're going to go to the Power User app. Apple's apps are generally not what you'd call power user. Some of them can be if you do enough like investigating, but generally speaking, they are the base example of what an application should be. And I think Invites, just like clips, in a lot of ways is an example of here's what you can do when you make this kind of app on iPhone. And Invites especially is here's what you can do when you take a bunch of our APIs and use them in one app. Because I can honestly say I haven't seen many apps do this. They can do this. Someone could build Apple Invites. Apple didn't have to build it, so to speak. With Apple Music integration, with Photos integration, with all of these things, you could almost one-to-one build this app, right? So Apple Weather and everything, they all have APIs that tie them together. So it's cool that Apple made this as an example tool, but I wonder how serious they are about it. And if it's going to stick around, is this going to be retired or just forgotten about? Are we going to go 8 years and talk about how it's still here, barely touched, right? This seems to happen a lot. So we'll see. This episode is brought to you by Factor, a ready-to-eat meal that is gourmet-style food that you can pop in the microwave and have ready to eat in around 2 minutes. They have a lot of great options that covers 8 dietary preferences across 40 different plates. You can choose between things like the keto meal diet. You can get the chef's choice, which was where I went for. Lots of good food. I really enjoyed, honestly, some of their vegetarian plates better than some of the ones with the meat in it, but they were all excellent. The spicy sweet potatoes and peanut sauce, just awesome. And then they have these cold pressed juices that pair with it so well, and can't say enough about it, honestly. The meals taste good. They feel good. They're a good portion. You don't go away feeling bloated or overeaten or anything like that. And I've been eating them after my workouts lately, and they just leave me fueled and ready to go throughout the rest of the day. As long as you choose the meals, your preferences that you enjoy, I think you can't really go wrong. They come in these little pre-packed containers, shipped in a box, refrigerated, never frozen. Easy to dispose of the box and contents, and then the packages themselves slide right into your refrigerator, and you have a week to eat them. And then as you finish your last meal, your next Factor meal should be arriving in the mail, ready to go. So eat smart with Factor. You can get started with factormeals.com/AppleInsider50off. That's /AppleInsider50off, and use the code AppleInsider50off and get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That code AppleInsider50off at factormeals.com/AppleInsider50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. And thanks to Factor for supporting the Apple Insider Podcast.
I'm very pro software. In our discussions over the years now, I'm very clearly software led. You are more hardware led. I think we've been talking a lot about software today, so I'm happy. But I am very curious about one particular hardware thing that happened while I was away, and it seems right down your alley. Apparently, Apple has just killed off some version of Apple Vision Pro glasses Smart something. It's the end for Vision Pro, or am I misreading some clickbaity headlines?
There were definitely some takes on this report, and I think the original report didn't do it any favors because I think they used the word failure about 6 times throughout the article. But basically, Apple decided, first of all, there are, I think, 3 or 4 different projects, probably more, that we don't even know about, for head wearable displays. So Apple Vision Pro is one. We have one public. Then there's the mythical Apple glasses, which are the futuristic, transparent AR glasses that have basically Apple Vision Pro displays, but you can see through them naturally instead of using computer vision. So that's another mythical product. A third product would be something closer to Meta Ray-Bans, where it's basically just prescription glasses you wear with computer parts in them, like headphones, speakers, microphones, that let you do smart things through the glasses, but the glasses themselves aren't the smart thing. And then there's a fourth product, which we've heard of, but I think it kind of just came and went. I think they're popular to a very certain niche, but it's this glasses you connect to a computer and they act as an external display. And so if you've ever heard of X-Real, this is a set of glasses that you can even plug in your iPhone to, but you still have to interface with the iPhone with your hands. But you put these glasses on and it blows it up to this big screen in front of your face, or you can use it with your Mac. I've heard of people using it so they have a monitor they can wear while they're laying down and interface with their computer in bed, stuff like that. So like these glasses exist and they work, but they're a very niche, very specific type of platform. And this X-Real style glasses is what Apple has internally stopped development on.
So it's not... I don't feel like I care now you've described it this way, but what I imagined was, I suppose, Apple Vision Pro that looked more like a pair of normal spectacles, and you're saying not that.
Yeah, those are still in development. And honestly, development's a weird thing, right? You have so many stages, from conceptualizing, diagramming, and patenting, and going through like the process of building prototypes and testing and all of this stuff. What's probably happened is they made it to the prototyping stage and realized this isn't something they want to do and took it out of prototyping. So now it's just back to a conceptual stage, which is probably alongside the other products they're testing. And they're no longer bothering with requesting prototype units from certain supply chain partners. And fine, we don't really need these. Apple Vision Pro. So this would basically be a hardware version of the virtual display in Apple Vision Pro. That would be its only feature. And that's fine. People find use of that, but Apple doesn't need to build that. We already have it with X-Real glasses. This isn't something Apple could improve upon greatly, I think.
Well, in that case, the only real Apple Vision Pro news I heard this week is that if you're in the military or if you're a veteran, you can apparently buy Apple Vision Pro for 10% off from Apple. Is it like a veteran's store or something that like an educational discount?
It's the same system as education, basically. You sign in using authorized login, and you can get up to 10% off of a lot of things. I've ordered iPads and monitors this way. Apple Vision Pro is a good steep discount. It's like $350 to $400. And if you configure it for the higher things, it's 10%. So whatever you get, 10% off of that. So you're basically getting rid of your taxes, which is nice. I'm surprised it took them this long to get it into that market, but cool. I mean, maybe Gen 2 will be in there sooner, and I won't have to pay the full price when it comes out.
Right. Because I know how you use your Apple Vision Pro and you have a Mac in it. Mac is a fashion accessory to you, I understand, but you still use it in Apple Vision Pro. Just to throw back to something I heard in last week's episode when you were talking with Tim Churton, I was terribly intrigued by the fact that he bought what sounds like a broken MacBook Air for some ludicrously good price, and he's using it as a Mac, like a headless Mac. But it sounded like he actually took off the display. He didn't just somehow close the lid or something. Did I misunderstand that? And if so, how do you remove the lid from these things?
Apparently, it's not. It's a delicate operation, but easy enough to do at home if you take your time. People did this a few months ago. I think Federico Viticci was one of the ones who inspired it. He always loves his crazy experiments. Right. And basically, he bought a MacBook Air that had a broken display. It just did not function, but the rest of the computer was seemingly okay. He took a gamble, bought it for $300. The Mac booted fine. The display just didn't turn on, so he removed the display, and it works as a trackpad, keyboard, and Mac component for the Vision Pro.
I don't want to see it. There's going to be something wrong. I imagine sparks coming out of the back of the keyboard or something. No. Okay.
People have speculated that Apple could release something like this, like a trackpad keyboard with an M series chip inside of it that ran macOS, and just sell that to Vision Pro users. But it would probably cost $1,000.
Yes.
I don't mind the idea, but for me personally, I like my setup better of I have my separate compute unit. I can bring whatever keyboard I feel like that week, so whatever mechanical keyboard I'm testing or using, and my preferred trackpad, which is Apple's Magic Trackpad. So teach their own. I think it is. I thought you would find it humorous, though, or maybe dreadful, that he decapitated a MacBook Air for his Vision Pro.
Yeah, it's a week later and I'm still trying to decide good or bad, but clever, I thought. So let's give that then. Except you just mentioned processors, and that does raise another thing. There is this report that Apple's M5 processor is now in mass production, but for what device? What is going to get it first?
I saw a couple of headlines just chucking Vision Pro in there. As they said, Apple's M5 is coming for Mac and iPad and Vision Pro. And it's just like, no. I mean, it wasn't their fault, to be clear. This was a rumor, I believe, maybe originating from Mark Gurman earlier in the year, maybe, obviously 2024 at this point. But it was a little while back suggesting that Apple Vision Pro would get a chip update with M5 sometime in 2025. I am totally shutting that down. And we haven't heard it repeated since, so maybe it went away. It doesn't make sense for Apple to update the chipset in a device that doesn't have any real utilization. There's no chip pushing no app pushing the boundaries of the Apple Vision Pro right now. And releasing an M5 version, it would be bad, like what's the word, like bad for the consumers who already bought Vision Pro. Like they would be telling them, you bought it at a wrong time. Basically, yeah. You should have just waited a year because, you went in and got the early adopter and then we gave you nothing for it. Now here's the M5 version. Do you feel happy now that you have to go and spend another $3,500 on the identical device? Because that's the rumors. Nothing would change except for the M5 chipset. What would that give us? Basically nothing. And then on top of that, supply chain inventory. So you sold these Vision Pros somewhere in the range of 500,000 units so far, and now you're just going to chuck out another 500,000 units. No, they're already constrained on the displays, and they're selling them not as many as they can make, but they're selling them good enough that it's not scarce. It's just they're doing. The inventory is made, right? We heard rumors a few months ago of Apple stopping some of the supply chain portions of Apple Vision Pro because they had enough. They had enough of this display cover. They had enough of this component. So in the chain to kind of pull back on that. So you're telling me they're going to go restart that supply chain and start building M5 units with all of the M2 units still on the shelves? None of it makes any sense. So no, I don't think M5 is coming to Apple Vision Pro this year.
Isn't there an argument that at some point Apple will be making only M5s and loads of them, and it'll be cheaper for them to just whack it in Apple Vision Pro, even if they don't particularly make a selling point of it?
There's a cross, two lines on a graph. Vision Pros in inventory going down. M2 chips available going down, and then there's a chart somewhere. Basically, I'm poorly describing where you're right. There's an intersection at some point where they're going to run out of M2 Apple Vision Pros, but I think that's when the next generation Apple Vision Pro will be available in 2027. They're not going to run out of these things anytime soon. Apple's made enough that I believe. I think this was even in one of the reports. I think this was Ming-Chi Kuo, who said Apple has enough Apple Vision Pro supply chain inventory to get them through the next couple of years of sales. Right. And that's fine because, let's say I think the number was somewhere around 3 to 5 million units by 2027. They probably have that. And if they've already made all of that inventory that's going to be only selling in those numbers between now and 2027, it's probably enough. Why release an M5 version when you already have all the inventory you need until Gen 2 can come out, and that'll be the, M6, M7 chipset?
So where will the M5 come out?
First, it'll probably be... This is tricky. We're going to get the M4 Ultra in June, and probably right after the M5 and iPad Pro, if that's the cycle that we're currently on. We still need to see what happens with iPad Air, if it gets M4 or not. We're still waiting on M4 MacBook Airs too, correct? Am I? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're only in February. So we've got time to see how this all shakes out. But yeah, M5 is coming for Macs in the fall for sure, and maybe an iPad Pro if.
Oh, right. So
right.
You don't think that the fact that the iPad Pro got the M4 first, that's not the start of a trend, it's a one-off aberration, it could go either way for the next one?
It's just where it fell in the timeline, right? The iPad Pro last year was March. Apple is, I would very seriously doubt iPad Pro is going to release with an M5 in March. That would be impressive turnaround. That's literally a year. They generally don't do that with these machines. 18 months is usually the go between. And I personally am not sure if I'm going to upgrade just for an M5 chip. So,
yeah, I was thinking when you said about no app is pushing an Apple Vision Pro, I don't think anything is pushing an iPad Pro to use an M4 fully. So would it use an M5 more? I mean, Final Cut Pro obviously maxes out everything, but not really anything else.
The only big benefits you'd get from an M5 and an iPad right now is gaming. You can always have more compute for gaming, but otherwise, no, you're not really going to get anything out of an M5 right now. Apple would have to really sell it. Maybe they would come out with a new Pro app to go with the M5 announcement, but it feels more like a chipset bump, and if they're giving it the life it needs to the room it needs to breathe, I think it would be this fall, not this spring. So there's a chance M5 could come to a Mac first this time, but it really just depends on where Apple lands. Like, they could announce an iPad Pro in July, and that would be the first one with an M5. But then if they wait till October, it could be here's a MacBook Pro and an iPad Pro at the same time. We'll just have to wait and see.
Do you ever think we're going to get an iPhone with an M series processor?
That's not the point. The whole point of the M series chip is these higher end machines, and they need more cooling. So by the time you pare down an M series chip to fit in the iPhone size, it would basically be an A series chip anyway. So no point in doing that.
But it was worth putting it into the iPad. People were surprised when that happened, it seemed to me. But you think it was more inevitable there?
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, Apple wants it to be this computer replacement, computer alternative. So it can't run iPhone chips if it's going to be taken seriously as a laptop alternative. And if you're doing that, yes, that's when you use the M series chip. And there was enough space for it to run what is basically a full-fledged desktop chipset inside of this iPad. It might be missing a core. It might be underclocked a little bit to keep the temperature down, but there's enough cooling space, thermal capacity of the iPad that it can handle an M series chip. Whereas putting an M series chip in an iPhone just doesn't work for its size class. You would basically make it into an A series chip.
That makes sense.
Paring it down that far.
Here's something that doesn't make sense. I quite like the fact that we've talked first about apps and then about hardware, because I don't know where this one falls, but I know you know more about it because it involved games. I read this week that Doom, the famous old game, even I've played Doom back in the day, can be played on Apple's, is it a Lightning to HDMI adapter? I don't understand. You can play it on your telly. Is that what the news is?
No, there's a computer inside of this HDMI adapter, a very small computer that runs, I believe, iOS. This HDMI adapter is a computer, but they've removed all of the everything except for what it needs to transcode information from one end to the other. It's kind of like, I'm going to go for a thing here. It's kind of like in SpongeBob SquarePants, where Squidward asks SpongeBob to draw a circle, and SpongeBob starts by drawing a fully perfect head, and then erasing everything, leaving only the circle. That's how Apple built this HDMI adapter. They started with a computer and then erased all the extra parts until they had an HDMI adapter.
Is that sensible? I mean, it seems.
I mean, who knows, but they did it. And someone figured it out and decided, well, this computer inside of this can probably run Doom. So they hacked it together. They had to really break into this thing because it's not made for this. But the processor inside of that HDMI port did run Doom, and they used a connected MacBook to display.
So the fact that it's Doom isn't significant. It could have been Microsoft Word or something like that, but they went the Doom route.
Kind of. Yeah, because it does have some graphics intensity. Like obviously, it being so archaic, it doesn't need much. You can run Doom on a toaster these days, but the thing is like they got Doom running on a touch bar, right? Because there's a whole computer inside of a touch bar.
Okay,
remember? And they actually got it to display because touch bars are display. So it's kind of a challenge. People also do this with Quake, which is basically just it's the Doom alternative competitor, whatever. But yeah, like. People like just seeing if they can get it to run. Microsoft Word being less intensive, you can probably get Microsoft Word to run on literally anything because it's depending on which one you're talking about. The newer ones require like 25 gigs of RAM to have all those little icons.
To be fair, so you
guess,
can have Microsoft Word crash on any device you like. But it seems to me then that it's almost an inevitability of the internet. Here's a device, a game will follow. I would offer that it's pretty much the same logic, that if there's any kind of ability to do this, there will be a porn app for it. And there is this week. Since 2007, there hasn't been anything like this on the iPhone, but now, yeah.
It's tricky. So, obviously, I even quoted it in the piece because I think it's funny. There's this Broadway musical with a song called "The Internet Is for Porn." Yeah. And it's stupid. It's been parodied so many different ways. I think World of Warcraft had a parody at some point. But anyway, like it's one of those things, right? Humanity, ever since the existence of humanity, some type of adult entertainment content, explicit material has existed. We invented drawing so we could draw naked people, right? We invented computers so we could put pornography on it, basically. It's always been the case. And what's weird about it, and I know this is a weird subject for some people, so I apologize, but it's just reality. Every time a technology has existed, the porn industry has promoted that. So VHS actually was able to partially succeed because of the porn industry. And we're seeing it again and again, computers, technologies, phones. But now, here we are, 2025. Apple's had an iPhone for 18 years, and you could never get this as an app on the App Store. Why? Because even Steve Jobs, I think, just said, no, we have a moral obligation to keep it off of the App Store.
Yes.
If you want that, go buy an Android. That is what Steve Jobs said. And to be fair, I think other executives have said, well, you can use Safari. And to break it down even further, you can go on the App Store right now and download Reddit and X, and there's so many other apps. There's a lot of art sharing communities where, as long as it's not the primary purpose of the app, and it's a setting that you can only reach, you have to make a profile, you have to log in, you have to go to a profile setting, and you have to turn on explicit content. Only then will it be visible. That is actually allowed on the App Store, and there are many apps that allow that to happen. So there is quote unquote pornography on Apple's App Store, but there are no quote unquote explicit porn apps until the EU required alternate app stores. And now the first app, and I thought the name was funny, Hot Tub, was released in the EU, but they've kind of played a weird PR game.
Well, originally, Hot Tub, I thought it was to do with Hot Tub Time Machine. That threw me a little bit. A film I don't think you've heard of from the sound of it. Okay. Number one's good.
I've seen it.
Didn't really make it through number two, but okay. I thought inevitable. EU, third-party app store, of course. I mean, I didn't think of it before it happened. I'm not clever enough for that, but yes, I thought inevitable. But now I'm reading more about that. There's a claim that Apple approved it, and I know Apple didn't. They've been shouting about the fact that they haven't. So is that the PR thing you're talking about? Is that messy messaging?
Yes. Riley Testa knew exactly what he's doing. I think he's the guy who makes Delta and runs the Alt Store, which is an alternative app store in the EU. And they put out a press release, I guess a post on Blue Sky and X, saying Apple has approved the first porn app, Hot Tub, in the EU. And they use that phrasing, approved, and they were like, haha, it's at 18th birthday, they're old enough for this now or whatever. But the key part of this is Apple approved. Now, there's some semantics here. Apple did notarize this app, which is a system Apple put in place for Mac apps, and then they repurposed it for allowing third-party apps to exist on iPhone that are distributed outside of the App Store in the EU. So what they do is they check the app for viruses and malware or known attack metrics and secret software and all the stuff you could do bad things with. And once the checks are done and they verify the app is running proper APIs and not going to do anything bad to your phone, they notarize it saying it is okay to distribute. Now that is what they did. And then of course Altstore ran with it and said Apple approved. And then Apple very quickly said, no, we do not approve. This is not allowed. In fact, we would never allow this to happen anywhere but the EU, but the DMA required us to do this. So just a funny little PR game. And even after this all happened and everyone's talking about it now, I don't know if this is the right use of the word, but Riley Testa posted on Blue Sky a chart of downloads of the Alt Store, and he says, thanks Apple for the Streisand effect. And I'm not sure if that's the right use of the Streisand effect, but I get what they're going for. Apple, I don't think, tried to avoid publicity here. I like the whole situation. The Streisand effect is like, right, Barbara Streisand tried to hide something and it caused it to blow up in the news, right? And it brought more attention to it. Apple didn't try to hide this. They came out swinging saying, no, we did not. So whatever the case, it did draw a lot of attention to the Alt Store and increase downloads. So good on them for making money and getting app downloads. But I just found the whole thing kind of
the makers
funny.
of a porn app would be naughty. I'll take your point there. Okay.
Riley didn't make it, but he's distributing it, and even Epic had to step up and say, because Apple in their comment said alternate stores like Alt Store and Epic said, no, we don't have any porn apps in ours. We're not doing that. But then I think Apple was trying to point out that the EU was bankrolling Alt Store, which is distributing a porn app. So even if they're tangentially involved, they are involved. So the whole thing is just odd. I mean, for me personally, I don't care. I can see why Apple sees it. Apple treats it as a safety issue, where my answer to that is just use age restriction properly, right? Create an X-class app that can only be accessed if your Apple ID is over 18, and obviously people can get around that. Well, guess what? People can just go to Safari and browse for this stuff. So, and people's arguments I've seen is, well, if you allow porn, you're going to allow malware. I don't think that's necessarily true. I know the two are often related because of the types of websites that host this stuff are often grimy. But again, Apple could take control of this and not allow the malware part to happen. But they already basically allow this stuff on the App Store in different ways. Look up the word hookup, and it is not hiding the fact that those apps are used for very adult reasons. So I just find it all very funny. I don't really have a strong opinion on this either way. Do what you're going to do, but it's just Apple's reaction to it, and Riley Testa's pushing buttons, and just this whole back and forth was just kind of for
some reason I kind of want to shake this off and move on to the last thing I wanted to ask you about, because I missed this being away, but you obviously didn't. Fire Aid. There was a concert presumably for the Los Angeles, California fires and things, and apparently Apple did a thing for this.
Well, Apple participated in distribution. I think everyone that had a streaming service did this, so you could watch it basically anywhere. But Apple Music was one of them, and I just thought it was cool. We watched it live, and it was a really good concert. It was very long. I think we ended up not seeing the whole thing the first time through just because it was several hours. But they had many big artists come together and sing for this charity event where a bunch of people donated. And it was really, really fun, just live event, very emotional. And it's still there in Apple Music. We have a link in the show notes. You can go watch the whole thing. It's funny, though. It shows up as a station. It says it's a radio station, but it's a recording of a live broadcast.
I just clicked that link and it's telling me it's 5 hours, 48 minutes and 52 seconds long. So that's quite a bit.
I think we watched about 3 hours. Yeah, we watched about 3 hours.
Fancy seeing it. So that's the rest of my day sorted out. While I'm watching that and you're working away on Apple Insider, how can people reach you?
Well, I'm on Blue Sky. I'm using Mastodon. I've pared back that a little bit. I kind of let the Ivory subscription subside because I'm not actively using Mastodon too much, so I'm using the regular app, but I still get notifications. Blue Sky is where I am most active for sure. You can always email me. I've got a few emails recently, and people have emailed me about HomeKit Insider recently too, about an Apple TV issue I brought up, so I appreciate that. But gotten some emails about some of the political content that we've done over the last couple of weeks. I wanted to touch on that a little bit here, because normally we read the podcast reviews, and I think, generally speaking, if it's criticism, good or bad, we're happy to read them. But in this case, these podcast reviews were made in bad faith, so we're not going to really air them here. You can go read them. They're public, whatever. But we got a few one-star reviews from, I think, is a vocal minority of our listener group, just complaining about some of the politics and our points of view. Well, first of all, I just wanted to clarify, we're happy for the feedback, even if it's some of it is insulting. Some of you are being deliberately insulting, but I want to be clear. We're not a political show. This isn't going to change anytime soon. We report on technology and Apple. Sometimes, inevitably, technology touches on politics. There's a lot of regulations, and a lot can happen based on who's in power. And we're human beings. We're going to have emotions and feelings and opinions, and this is not a standard article. This show is not a piece of copy that you're going to read on a website, right? We can usually keep an equal tone when we're writing because we have time to write it and edit it and review it and make sure that we're taking a proper statement and steering clear of opinion unless it's warranted. Here, you're getting us a little bit more raw. We're speaking off of the cuff. We're going to have emotions and feelings about these things. It's who we are, and we're not going to change. We're going to continue doing the show as it is, and when things get a little bit political, we're going to tell you the news, and we're always going to be truthful, and we're going to stick to the talking points. And if one of us gets a little bit involved, believe us, we're going to move past it fairly quickly, which we have in the past, and I thought we were pretty even. I know we did share some of our bias, but we were never insulting or hateful, and we never stuck to it too long. So I just want to be clear, this is not a political show. It's not going to get political in that sense. If there is news that touches on it, we'll cover it and we'll move on. And I just want to say, look, we're happy to have any listener here, and if you guys disagree with us on a fundamental level, it's okay to reach out and let us know. But if you disagree with us in a way that requires you to insult us to make yourself feel better, it's probably best to just keep it to yourself because it's kind of silly. But again, thanks for listening to the show, guys, and I appreciate all the feedback. And maybe some of you guys who enjoy the show, maybe go help balance out some of the bad reviews we've gotten lately. Go leave us some good star reviews.
For my part, I think if something happens, we say it. But I also, you're off the cuff. I'm fully scripted here. I have a team of writers, a writer's room going through this. I started off that section just asking you particularly about how people reach you, and you mentioned Blue Sky. I'm also on Blue Sky. I'm finding it slightly irritating that it's forever logging me out, though. Is that just me? Am I doing something wrong? Or do you have to keep signing in as well?
No, I've had that issue with Blue Sky. Some of the third-party apps I'm testing, it has me log in sometimes, but I'm not having that with the main
I'm leaning on the wrong button all the time. That's what it is. You can reach me through Blue Sky then, but also email, and I think actually email's best. Although William at AppleInsider.com gets to me. I'm a little bit behind at the moment. Sorry, I've been away. The cold, all that stuff, blame that. There is also my YouTube channel, 58 Keys, and then there is Apple Insider Plus. If you are a paid subscriber to Apple Insider through Apple Podcast subscriptions or through Patreon, then just hang about for a second. You're going to hear some more stuff. And if you're not, it would be such a treat for you to join us. Have a look in the show notes for how to do it. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much too to our sponsors, Oracle and Factor. And we'll speak to you next week.
Yep. Talk then.